Hi, and welcome to Lecture 4. In this lecture, we're going to discuss Bitcoin mining, specifically the following topics. First, we're going to go ahead and discuss why mining is necessary. Next, we're going to discuss a block. Then we're going to discuss the blockchain, mining hardware, mining pools, how to set up a mining client, and then finally, we're going to discuss the future of mining very briefly. So let's go ahead and begin discussing why mining is necessary and what exactly is mining. So let's begin with an elucidating example. Here is the $100 bill. And you'll notice a couple of features about it. First, we'll have a little name on here, the Federal Reserve, which is the central issuing authority. You have the United States of America, so you kind of understand what nations it's associated with. There's some nice little signatures. The Federal Reserve has its little seal, but it also has a number attached to it. And this number actually lets them verify that this bill is a legitimate bill in circulation. There should only be one bill currently floating around the world, wherever this $100 bill may be, that has this number on it. Okay? So the advantage of a central issuing authority is that it can arbitrarily decide, if necessary, that it needs to create new money. It also can decide, it also has the ability, either by itself or with the aid of proxies like banks, the Secret Service, the Treasury Department, the IRS, and many other agencies in this big infrastructure, in some way, form, or fashion, verify the transactions that are made with this bill as much as possible. It also can go ahead and determine, roughly speaking, how much money a particular person has, looking at things like tax returns, transaction histories, and such and such. Okay, so with a central authority and a government behind it, with a little bit of legwork, one can verify transactions if necessary, and also a central authority asserts that it has the right to create new money. Well, here's the problem. The Bitcoin has no central issuing authority, and as you've noticed in the prior lectures, we've kept saying that the money that enters the system is constrained by algorithms, and new money is not given to any one party. You have to do something for money. So mining, in a nutshell, is the process upon which new money is created and put into the Bitcoin economy based upon merit, and also is the process upon which transactions are verified. In fact, transactions verified via the mining process are significantly better verified than transactions in the U.S. economy. I like to use the analogy of, imagine going into Walmart and having a Secret Service agent standing at every cash register, and every time somebody spends $20 or whatever have you, they hand their money. The cashier will hand that bill to the Secret Service agent, and he'll say, yes, it's not counterfeit money. Or you'll have a financial crime specialist every time you use your credit card verifying you are who you say you are, for example. This is the level of security that the Bitcoin actually asserts over the network. And we're going to discuss how it does that in this lecture. So how does mining create new money and also verify transactions? Well, this is a really complex issue. And Satoshi Nakamoto, the reason why we consider him to be a very smart person, whoever he or she may be, is that he actually figured out a solution. Basically what Satoshi did is he said, let's take a queue, meaning a queue is like a line of transactions over a finite period of time, first in, first out. Okay? And let's treat that finite period of time to be roughly 10 minutes, so that we can do this 6 times an hour, give or take. And let's associate with those transactions a very hard math problem that we can go ahead and fix to take roughly 10 minutes to solve for a computer, or even lots of computers working together as quickly as possible to solve it. The first computer or group of computers to resolve this problem will receive an award of Bitcoins. But here's the brilliance of Satoshi's solution. By solving this problem, every single transaction that occurred over the last 10 minutes are verified, meaning that the network, every Bitcoin node, every client, every person using a Bitcoin who has a wallet, so forth, believes that these transactions are indeed legitimate. In fact, if you wait 6 or 7 time periods, the probability of any of these transactions being illegitimate is so astronomically low, it is impossible. So Bitcoins verify very quickly, and this is actually kind of a unique way of introducing new money into the system. The process of doing this is called mining. And the set of transactions that verify along with the proof of work are called a block. So let's slowly walk through this. Our goal is to verify transactions, and our goal is to introduce new money into the economy. We put both of these goals together into a concept known as the block, and every 10 minutes we not only introduce new money into the economy, we verify all the commerce that has taken place over the last 10 minutes. If you're curious about the computer science fundamentals of this problem, then I'd highly recommend going to this link, and this is actually the paper that Satoshi published in late 2008 describing basically how the Bitcoin protocol works, how the Bitcoin itself works, what is the mathematical justification. He includes some source code, and he talks about why this is secure, and the references are really amazing. It's based on some cryptocurrency that was invented back in the 90s along with Hashcash. So it was really a phenomenal paper, and it resulted in the creation of the Bitcoin. So now let's discuss a block. Okay, so the block is basically, as we've said before, a bulk set of transactions, roughly all the transactions that have taken place over 10 minutes, give or take, alongside a really hard math problem. And this math problem is solved by finding what's called a hash value under a certain value. So we're going to walk our way through this because it's kind of a complex computer science topic. We have these things called hashes. And basically what a hash is that you take an input. In the case of a cryptographic hash, you take an input and the output is just some random string of bizarre numbers. And the hash protocol that the Bitcoin uses is called an SHA-256 hash, which are used by the NSA, they're used by the Department of Commerce, they're used by corporations, anybody who wants to do things very securely. Hashes are one way. Cryptographic hashes are one way. So for every input, there will be an output, and there's absolutely no way one can predict what the output is going to be. It's totally random. And given an output, there is absolutely no way one is able to engineer what the input was. So how that hard math problem that the miners must solve to be awarded the block works is that it takes the transactions, a thing called a nonce, and a couple of other pieces of information, and it says that you must input these into a function, iterating the nonce, and achieve an output lower than some sort of threshold. Now, because we don't know what the hash output is going to be, basically what we do is we just start at the lowest level nonce possible, 1, and just iterate our way through it until by brute force we discover what this value is going to be. Now there's a lot of magic that happens in between this, but that's beyond the scope of what we need to talk about. Just try to conceptualize that it's kind of like putting something in to a machine, and the machine will output a random value, and you hope that that random value is less than some sort of predetermined number, and that number is called the difficulty. It's kind of like a lottery system. That's another way that people tend to describe it. And just like a lottery, it's winner takes all. So you have many people playing Powerball or Mega Millions, which are two very popular lottery systems in the United States. And sometimes the jackpots get very large, millions upon millions of dollars. So basically how this works is the difficulty is the set of numbers you have to hit. So remember, with Powerball, you have the Powerball number and then 5 numbers associated with it. You have to get all 6 of them to win the lottery. And the same deal with the block. To win the block, you have to achieve a hash beneath a certain value, and the amount of tickets you can buy is the rate at which you're able to produce hashes and check them. So you'll see terms like mega hashes or giga hashes. Think of those as just basically how many lottery tickets you're allowed to buy per second, and we just see if any one of them matches the numbers you need to have. The first person to match the numbers wins the block. That's basically what mining is in a nutshell. Block is just a set of transactions that have occurred over the last 10 or so minutes. We have a predetermined number that we wish to get to, and we arrange that number via this notion called a difficulty so that the block is won within give or take 10 minutes. It's not a perfect process. If it takes too long to win a block, meaning 30 minutes, an hour, etc., then the system will automatically lower the difficulty. If it takes too little, meaning there's too much computational power inside the Bitcoin ecosystem, then it'll actually increase the difficulty so that we can fix it around 10 minutes. So a predictable amount of new Bitcoins enter the economy every single 10 minutes. Again, the first person to produce a hash that satisfies the difficulty rate, i.e. get the right number, wins every single coin associated with the block. When the Bitcoin was first produced in 2009, the blocks were 50 coins in size. Now the blocks are 25 coins, and every 4 years the blocks awards are cut in half. So we just recently cut the awards from 50 to 25, and within 4 more years, 25 will be cut down to 12.5 Bitcoins per block. And this will continue into the year 2140, when no more coins are awarded. So this is how we know how much coinage is going to enter the ecosystem consistently and reliably. And what's really elegant about this system is that it distributes money based upon, statistically speaking, whoever's done the most work. So it's kind of a merit-based system, and the work that people do is not waste work. It's not just made up math. The work they're doing is based upon transactions alongside a hard math problem to make sure that people can't rig the system. And so every time you buy something with a Bitcoin, that transaction is going to be placed into a ledger, and that ledger is going to be checked over and over and over and over again. And we're going to see that in just a moment. This is the ledger, the blockchain. So the first block was created by Satoshi, and it's called the Genesis block. And for our purposes, I'll show it to you. So here's actually the Genesis block. And there's a lot of garbage here about how the hash works and all these things. You don't need to know any of that. This is just basically the very first Bitcoin block, and it was created January 3rd, 2009. And Satoshi decided to include a headline from the New York Times, which says, "Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks." So it gives you, it's a common way that people date things is by using newspaper headlines. And you can see a bunch of metadata and other raw, interesting information. But after this block was created, 10 minutes later, the next block was created, and blocks are linked together. When we say that you're able to go ahead and follow the entire blockchain back down to the Genesis block, we're not being metaphorical. Every single transaction ever made in the history of the Bitcoin is contained within the blockchain. So for a transaction to be considered legitimate, you'll have to find it somewhere in the blockchain. After a block has been verified, it's connected to the blockchain, and then everybody in the entire Bitcoin ecosystem who is a miner starts working on the very next block to attach to the chain. And so let me show you what the blockchain actually looks like. This is the blockchain from blockchain.info. And right now, the most current block as of April 18th, 2013 is block number 232,053, and it was created about 7 minutes ago, and this block verified 469 transactions. A total amount of money that was spent over the last 10 minutes was 19,585.65 Bitcoins. And because it's like a lottery system, this is going to be awarded based upon who discovered the numbers first, and you can see BTC Guild did that, which is a mining pool, and we'll discuss that in a moment. But blockchain actually contains transaction records for every single block back to the Genesis block. You can see the hash for the block, you can see the height of the block, meaning the number of blocks. So this right here is the 32,000. This right here is the 232,053rd block to have been produced. And then we can take a look at the prior block. And this one was constructed in Germany. And this one right here, it was constructed somewhere on the East Coast in Massachusetts. It's kind of a really amazing thing to be able to see. And we can see the slush pool. That was in Germany. Germany. I guess there's a lot of German blocks in the network. But what you should take from this is that not only are we able to verify transactions and understand that the money you spent, you've had the right to spend, we actually, as a result of the blockchain, can vet every transaction since the very beginning of the Bitcoin. This is currently impossible with any normal money. There is no way with the US dollar that one can take an arbitrary dollar and, since when it was put into circulation, know every single location it's ever arrived at. In fact, there have been attempts by the Treasury Department to just track a couple of dollars that have flown through circulation, and it turned out to be nearly impossible. They lost most of the dollars, and only a few percentage points of them ever managed to complete a large enough journey for them to record it and get good data, because some dollars just disappeared, some dollars were destroyed. The blockchain is amazing in that if a Bitcoin is created, for the rest of the Bitcoin's existence, we'll know where it's at, and we'll know what accounts have received it, even though we don't know the identities of the people who have received it. So you can have your anonymity and also have great statistics at the same time. Blockchain is really an amazing thing. Think of the blockchain as basically a ledger. That's all you really need to know. It's basically a gigantic book. It's right now 6.5 gigabytes. The maximum size it can grow per year is 48 gigabytes. Generally, it grows about 1 to 2 gigabytes per year. Currently, people can install, can download and actually analyze the entire blockchain on their computer. Over time, it'll become more cumbersome, especially as the transaction volume picks up. But all intensive purposes, the blockchain is just a giant book that you can look through and understand where the coins are and verify who owns what. And everybody has a copy of it. The blockchain size and complexity prevents anyone from attempting to counterfeit transactions. I mentioned in a prior lecture the 51% attack. So it is conceivable that if someone gained 51% of the computing power of the Bitcoin network, they would be able, because of the way these math problems work, this proof of work is done, to actually counterfeit coins and cause other shenanigans. But I'm going to give you an idea of how much computer power is necessary to be able to get 51% of the Bitcoin network. So this is, as of November of 2012, the list of the most powerful supercomputers on the planet. So right here at the Department of Energy Oak Ridge National Laboratory, there's Titan, which was a $500 million, incredibly expensive, massive, multi-megawatt supercomputer. It took years to build. It took lots of planning, tons of scientists and really remarkably smart people. And this thing is used to do stuff like weather calculations. It's used to model nuclear explosions. It's amazing complex, and it's all the stuff it does is classified because it's in a secret government lab. And you can see there's one in the United States, there's one in Japan, there's one in China and Italy. But you can see all of these guys, they're around 27,000 teraflops, 20,000 teraflops, 11,000 teraflops, and so forth. I'm going to convert this to petaflops for you because the next statistic I'm going to bring up is going to become relevant. A petaflop is 1,000 teraflops. So the overall power of this computer, somewhere between 17 and 27 petaflops. And it has 560,000 computer processors in it. It's a pretty amazing thing. Okay, so now let's take a look at how much total processing power is in the Bitcoin network. So here's Bitcoin Watch. Currently, 818 petaflops. Let's look back here, 27 petaflops for the most powerful computer on the planet. 20 petaflops for the second most powerful, 11 for the third most powerful, and so forth. The Bitcoin network is 818 petaflops. You need 51% of that processing power to be able to cause problems to it. So you'd need over 400 petaflops of processing power. If you were to add up everything on this list, the top 10 most powerful supercomputers in the world, one's in China, one's in Italy, several in Germany, and so forth, you wouldn't even be able to touch it. You wouldn't even be able to get 51% of the computing power of the Bitcoin that you would need to rebuild the blockchain in a way that could cause problems. So this is why when people say the Bitcoin is computationally secure, even with the most powerful supercomputers on the planet at this point, it is physically impossible to go ahead and rig the blockchain to do things like have illegitimate transactions or counterfeit transactions or steal money and so forth. So computationally speaking, the Bitcoin is more secure than probably anything else on the planet. And using the right software, one can verify transactions very quickly and very easily. All right, so now we know what mining is, and now we understand what a block is, and we understand what the blockchain is. How do you actually mine? What do you need to do it? You need hardware. And so generally when the first Genesis block was created, Satoshi Nakamoto used a processor, used an Intel processor to go ahead and mine a block. Okay? And the difficulty rate was sufficiently low at the time that he was able to do this very quickly. He could generate lots of blocks because he wanted to go ahead and get some Bitcoins into circulation. Then as the difficulty ratcheted up, it became more and more difficult. And over time, people realized that they could use graphics cards using OpenCL and CUDA to mine Bitcoin significantly faster than they could on computer processors. So now Bitcoin mining is mostly done with graphics cards, the most popular AMD cards. And I have a website here that actually lists the speed of mining with graphics cards and CPUs. So if you look at a couple of graphics cards, and these are all AMD cards, here's the Model 5 7070, that's 212 mega hashes, and the card that I actually have in my computer is the 7970. Let's go find it on the list. Boop, ba-doop, ba-doop. Okay. 7950, excuse me. Yeah, so right here, 510 mega hashes. That's about what I'm getting. So let's compare that to some computer processors. Okay, so here are some AMD CPUs. The computer processor that I'm currently using is an AMD Phenom X6 1100T, and I can get about 22 megaflops, 22 mega hashes, compared to my graphics card, which gets over 500. And you can see the Intel chips do not fare much better either. So this kind of gives you an idea that if you're going to be mining Bitcoins, you're probably going to have to do it on a graphics card. In fact, you can't make any money doing it on a computer processor. It would cost you more money in power than the amount of Bitcoins you'd produce. As of 2013, we've also started to witness highly specialized hardware called field programmable grid arrays and also application-specific integrated circuits, which have been basically designed from the ground up to outperform graphics processing units, those graphics cards. So even though graphics cards are great and they're incredibly fast and they can do amazing things much faster than computer processors can, certain things, FPGAs and ASICs can even compute these hashes at a much greater rate, in the gigahashes. In fact, we're starting to see ASICs enter the market which are 5 to 50 gigahashes in processing power for a single ASIC, whereas the best graphics card on the market, the 7990 from AMD, is about 800 megahashes to a gigahash. So some of these ASICs are 25 to 50 times faster and consume less power. So it's pretty cool to see that people are now starting to build hardware from the ground up just to mine Bitcoins. Remember that mining is only profitable when you can recoup both the initial hardware cost and the power spent making Bitcoins. To make this a bit more clear, I'm going to open up a Bitcoin calculator. This is one of the ASIC miners I mentioned. Open up a Bitcoin calculator, and let's go ahead and pick something off the list. So let's say that you're going to mine with your computer processor. Okay, let's say you have a Core i7-2600K. Okay, and that's 6.7 megahashes of power. So let's go ahead and enter that in. If you were to mine for an entire month, right now you would make about $1.30 at the current exchange rate, which is, let's find out. $115 per coin. Okay, so you would make, I guess it was right there too. Dumb me. Okay, so if you're using a really powerful computer processor, you would only be making $1.30, and remember, you'd have to run it for an entire month, and you'd be eating about 10 cents worth of power per an hour. to 20 cents, depending upon where you live. So, if on the low end you'd be spending $2.40 a day on power. On the high end, you'd be spending about $5 a day in power, and you'd have to do that for an entire month. You use about $150 worth of power. All right, so the graphics card I have runs at 500 megahashes, and minus power, I'm making about $100 per month. So if I can find a way to get power cheaply, or maybe I have solar or something, I can actually make a hefty profit. This device right here that they're advertising runs at 50,000 megahashes. You can see it generates $10,000 worth of bitcoins every single month. Now, this is a bit deceptive. Remember that I said that we want bitcoins to be produced roughly every 10 minutes. So when many of these guys enter the market, as they have been, what's going to happen is that the difficulty will ratchet up so that we have to spend more gigahashes to go ahead and produce the same amount of bitcoins. Thus, this number will be reduced considerably as more of these guys enter in. But if you're an early adopter and you happen to have access to the hardware and your competition are graphics cards, just like when everybody was mining on their CPUs and the competition were graphics cards, you will make this kind of money. But very quickly you'll make considerably less. It's going to probably look more like this, which is still a respectable amount. Okay, so we have this notion of a mining pool. You've probably heard of it, and let's talk about it right now. Remember that the Bitcoin is a lottery system. Okay, so when somebody wins the lottery people don't get together and say, well, this guy bought 10,000 lottery tickets, so he should get the largest share of the lottery, and this guy bought 5,000 lottery tickets, so he should get the second largest share. It's a winner takes all. So even though you may have purchased one ticket and somebody bought 1 million tickets, if you hit the numbers and that person did not, will win the entire jackpot. And the Bitcoin is exactly the same way. When someone wins a block, they win a block outright. The coins are not divided. It goes straight to their address and it's theirs. End of story. So this is slightly problematic because let's say you buy all this really expensive mining equipment and you have gigahashes of processing power. You're still competing with petahashes of processing power inside the overall Bitcoin cluster, which basically means your probability of discovering this solution first at random is very, very low. So at some arbitrary point, maybe in a year or two of operation, you'll get a block of 25 Bitcoins. You'll be that lucky winner of the lottery, but not often. And this is just like in real life when people have lottery pools. So they say, my chances alone of winning the lottery are very low, but if I pool together with lots of people, it increases my chances. But then you have to trust that whoever's in charge of the pool is going to distribute the winnings. So the mining pools were created basically to combine massive sets of computers together so that the probability of these computers collectively finding that solution is very high. And in exchange, you get an equal division for the work that you've put in minus an operator cost. Pool operators generally take about 2 to 5%, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. It depends on a lot of features and factors. But the notion is that they share money in accordance with the work that people have done for the pool. So here's a list of common pools. There's 50 BTC, there's Bitarena, Bitcash. BTC Guild is currently the largest Bitcoin pool. The one I personally use is, let's see here, Slush's pool, mining.bitcoin.cz. And you can see in gigahashes, these are the amount of processing power that they have. And actually, this hasn't been updated for a while. These figures are not right at all. There's considerably more power entering the Bitcoin ecosystem than what's being listed here. And that's to be expected because ASICs and FPGAs have entered. But anyway, the probability that any one of these people is going to win by a brute force alone is proportional to how much work that they put in. So BTC Guild statistically is going to win more often than, let's say, Slush. So let's go ahead and take a look at blockchain. And it's telling us who's won. And you'll see BTC Guild, BTC Guild, BTC Guild, BTC Guild, BTC Guild, Slush. Okay. and then 50 BTC. And we see that they have lots more processing power than Slush does. So just even looking at a couple of blocks, we can see that this is indeed a good breakdown. And so for participating in a pool, you will receive a share of the work you've done. So when Slush finally does win a block of coins, the pool remembers who's done the most work, and the majority of the coins are given to whoever's done the most work, and it trickles its way down. So I'm currently mining with 2 graphics cards, a 7950 and a 7950, and I'm getting about $200 a month worth of Bitcoins. And I have some ASICs on the way, which are going to considerably increase my workload, and that will earn me several $1,000s a month if the market rate continues to stay around $115. And we'll discuss the market price in our speculation lecture. So if you wish to participate in a mining pool, one thing I'll warn you about, and I'll put it in bold red, is there is no notion of contracts in this world. It's kind of like the Wild West. The pool operator is the person who shall receive the Bitcoins first. It is the pool operator's sole decision to go ahead and allocate these Bitcoins out to people. So things like BTC Guild and Slush's pool, for example, they've been around for some time. People trust them. I trust them. I've been doing business with them for several years. They're not going to screw you. But some new pool operators, some pool operator you've never heard of, could conceivably just wake up one day and say, all the Bitcoins I've won, I am going to keep. Poo on you guys. So sorry. Okay? So you have to make sure that you trust the pool operator before you do any business with them, i.e. share your computer. All right, now let's go ahead and discuss how to set up a mining client. Let's say, for the sake of the argument, you've listened to all of this and you say, Charles, it's a really cool idea. I think I can make a little bit of money because I got a nice powerful graphics card in my computer. How do I actually mine? You've told me what mining is, what mining is used for, blah, 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 but how do I actually mine? Well, you mine by using a mining client. There is one that's created by the Bitcoin Open Source Foundation, but it's hard to use. So there's a new client that's been out for a little bit called GUI Miner, and it's really, really easy to use. Just go ahead and download it, save it, and I actually have a copy of GUI Miner running. And you can see it's right now connected to Slush's pool, and even though I'm getting a slightly reduced hash rate as a result of recording this video, I'm actually mining Bitcoins while talking to you guys, and I'm mining at the rate of right around 440, 450 mega hashes per second. And this is connected directly to Slush's pool. Slush is keeping a record of all the computations that I'm doing for his pool, and when they get a block of coins after a couple of verifications, Slush actually sends these coins straight to my Bitcoin wallet. And I've been doing this for quite some time. So GUI Miner is really easy to download. It's really easy to configure. You just basically download it. You don't even have to install it. You just open up the zip folder, and then you'll go ahead and put in your username and your password for whatever pool you're associated with. And there are many pools, as you can see, that are supported by the client. Okay, and let me show you what my pool looks like. Let's see. All right, so let's see, Slush Bitcoin. Mining CZ, I never can remember the URL. Okay, so this is right here what the Slush mining pool looks like. You just sign up for free. He explains everything you need to know, and you can also actually send Slush an email on his site with or talk to him with live support. He has every incentive to help you configure your Bitcoin mining client because it gives him more processing power. So I'd highly recommend using Slush or Bitcoin Miners Guild. BTC Guild has a slightly better web interface. Their fees are a little higher though. Okay. I would only recommend mining currently if you have an AMD graphics card, and I'd recommend you check the hardware list to get an idea of what your mining rate will be. The 7950 is one of the best graphics cards on the market right now. It cost me $300 when I purchased it, and therefore it's giving me pretty good hash rates. But even if you have an expensive NVIDIA graphics card, for example the GTX 680, which is a very expensive, very powerful card, due to architectural decisions that NVIDIA made, the NVIDIA card isn't so good for doing things like raw hash computations. There are complex technical reasons for this. It doesn't mean the GTX 680 is like a worse graphics card than an AMD card. They're just architecturally different, and it turns out that the AMD cards are a little bit better for mining. In some cases, they're twice or 3 times as fast as their NVIDIA counterparts. Although AMD cards are slower in certain respects for other computations like tessellation, for example, but that's not used with Bitcoin making. So I'd only recommend mining if you have an AMD graphics card and your graphics card is relatively new, 5000 series or 6000 series or better, and please check the hardware list that I provided to go ahead and see what your hash rate is going to be. Then what I'd recommend doing is go ahead, well, I guess I already had a link to Slush's pool in here. Go ahead and check out the Bitcoin mining calculator that we had in the prior slide, and just kind of get an idea of what your return is going to be. And you should factor in power. To mine effectively, you're going to have to leave your computer on basically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can have a little bit of downtime, but whatever downtime you have is less money in the bank. So just make sure that you're actually making money. You're not actually spending all of your profits on power. So right now, as it stands, your hash rate should be around 400 to 500 mega hashes. If it's not in that area, you'll probably per watt lose money just paying for the power for your card. Okay, now let's go ahead and briefly discuss the future of mining. Over time, mining will become the domain of large entities with highly specialized equipment and well-developed skills. As of right now, because the Bitcoin is very new, it's very well distributed, basically it's just a bunch of people leaving their computers on at night. But we've already seen electrical engineers, software experts, people who really know what they're doing, getting into this industry and building very special, very unique hardware specifically to do the kinds of math necessary for that proof of work problem that Satoshi designed in the initial Bitcoin protocol. This basically means if you're one of the small miners, you can't do this forever unless you start acquiring some of this highly specialized equipment. Most of the mining will be profitable if the Bitcoin continues to increase in value. It's only going to be profitable if the Bitcoin continues to increase in value. Miners are very receptive to this. And actually, it's kind of an interesting a sociological effect, an economic effect. If mining becomes less profitable, less people do it, less power overall in the Bitcoin ecosystem, and which basically means that for that difficulty factor, block generation starts becoming more than every 10 minutes. As a result, the difficulty factor actually scales down, which means it's easier to make Bitcoins, and therefore mining becomes more profitable per mega hash. You see, so this is a way how the system balances. If Bitcoins become much more profitable, more miners come in. More miners mean that we're starting to generate blocks faster, therefore the difficulty ratchets up. And if the value goes down, mining becomes less profitable, and therefore the difficulty scales down. However, that said, because of the amount of new entrants into the mining spectrum, the Bitcoin has to appreciate in value for mining to continue to be profitable, especially with the investment of highly specialized equipment. It's a really good crowd signal. In finance and in other fields, we tend to use crowd signals. Basically, we ask, what is the mass doing? What is the mob doing? What is the wisdom of the crowd? Now, in some cases, the crowd is wrong, and they're irrational, and they make big, bad mistakes. In other cases, the crowd can be very, very right. For that said, a lot of people who make decisions to buy hardware, specialized hardware to mine Bitcoins, have made that decision because they believe, number one, the Bitcoin is here to stay, but more importantly, number two, that the value of the Bitcoin is going to be above some sort of return value threshold. And because millions of dollars have been invested in new hardware to mine Bitcoins, especially over the last 2 years with FPGAs and ASICs, it's a very good signal that mining is going to become even more profitable. And regardless of the block reward, as long as transactions are done in Bitcoins, miners will receive Bitcoins from verification fees. I'll discuss this a little bit. So when you send money from one person to another person, so from you to your friend Bob, let's say, or when I sent money from myself to myself, the wallet on my computer to the wallet in the cloud, I actually had to pay a small transaction fee. What is this transaction fee? What is this verification fee? Well, I mentioned that a block is a queue of transactions. Whether my transaction is in that queue or not is entirely up to the miners who verify blocks. Now, you as a miner may say, hey, wait a minute, if you want to get your transaction verified before the other people, pay me a little bit of money, i.e. a transaction fee. So these transaction fees aggregate are what determine who gets their transactions verified first, usually in order of who pays the most. So if you have a very high value, very large transaction that you'd like to get verified, generally people will pay a small fee like 0.01 or 0.05 bitcoins or something like that to make sure that that transaction gets verified very quickly. If you have a very small transaction, for 0.001 bitcoins, for example, some cases, if the transaction volume is high, it may take several hours for my transaction to be verified because the transaction's smaller than a reasonable fee. So usually I can get it done. That said, every transaction inevitably will be verified regardless of what it is. But if you pay nothing, no transaction fee, it could sometimes even take days to verify a transaction. As a miner, whoever wins the block wins all the transaction fees associated with the block. So let's say for the sake of the argument that we stop making bitcoins. As long as there's commerce with the bitcoins and thousands of transactions being done per block, those transactions aggregate together will still be somewhat profitable for people to mine. So mining will always be profitable as long as first the Bitcoin is somewhat valuable and also the hardware cost plus the power cost to run the hardware is lower than the transaction fees. Okay, so that's all I have for you on the mining lecture. This is a very complex topic. What you should really try to take away from this lecture is mining is just a tool that was invented to replace the notion of a central bank as the issuer of new money and also to verify transactions that have occurred. To run a decentralized currency and make sure that everything's legitimate, everybody's on the same page, you need some sort of computational mechanism to do so. And Satoshi's solution is the one you see with these proofs of work. It's pretty amazing. Proofs of work first started appearing actually back in the 90s when people were considering ways of preventing spam as a curious historical footnote. And one of the solutions was, how about we make a computer, before it sends an email, do a computation that takes several seconds. Well, if you're sending your email, you wouldn't really care if it took an extra 5 seconds to send your email. But if you're a spammer, you would have to send several million emails every several minutes to go ahead and make that worth your time. Unfortunately, if you're sending, let's say, 50 emails and it's taking 2 seconds each, that's 100 seconds. So it's a little over a minute and a half to go ahead and send. Think about how long it would take to send 1 million emails. And this was kind of a way of dealing with spam. And it was proposed, I think it was called Hashcash, and many people thought about implementing it. Satoshi obviously read that paper because he took Hashcash and he modified and contorted it and turned it into the Bitcoin system we see today. So it's amazing how something that was never intended for a currency could wind up actually building a distributed peer-to-peer currency. All right, so that's all I have for you on mining. The next lecture, we'll go ahead and discuss Bitcoin speculation. When we say the Bitcoin is $115, how did we arrive at that price, and what do we need to know about it? And should you trade the Bitcoin? Okay, as always, thank you for listening, and have